So my name is Eric Binnion, and today I'm going to speak to you about perceived speed and optimization. It's a topic that I find pretty interesting because I think as developers, and at least myself as a developer, I find that I tend to focus on how fast a web page loads in terms of does it take 2 seconds or 3 seconds or what's the paint time. We can get this information from webpagetest.org, but we don't often think about how does the user feel, or does it feel snappy? We don't think in terms like that always. So first thing, you can find the slides and some sample code on wcorl2014.ericbinnion.com. And I'll probably update this over the next few days as I decide the sample code is not good enough. So a bit more about me. I'm a WordPress core contributor as of about 3.9. I'm a Code Wrangler Automatic. I started in mid-July. And I am pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science. And you can pretty much find me anywhere on the internet at eBinnion, so GitHub, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Quick overview of the session. We're going to talk about what is perceived speed. We'll give a few examples because I think word definitions don't always cut it. We'll go over why this is important. Like, who cares about perceived speed if we can get hard and fast numbers that our page loads in a second or two, right? We'll go over a couple implementation things. And then at the end, we can cover questions maybe, such as maybe frameworks you want to use, anything like that. So perceived speed, I define it as how quickly software appears to perform its task. So we're not talking in terms of seconds here, we're talking in terms of appearance. So to show you that, I'm going to show you the Google search page. This is before the auto search was turned on. So notice that we're typing in automatic in this case. We hit enter and then the page loads. This is a typical request. We send a response. That response is processed and we get the information back, right? Now this is something that Google added a couple years ago that is pretty standard, I believe. As soon as you start typing, that web interface is updated and it begins to show results immediately, or at least responds to your feedback. Here's another example. This is the P2 theme. This is a Mercury Child theme of that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to type in a post, we're going to type in some content, we're going to hit enter. And what you'll see is that there was a spinner up there. I think it's hard to see on the screen, but the spinner, as the request is being made, it's not doing anything. It's just it's waiting for the response to be sent, to be processed, to get information back. Once we get the information back, we then display it. So it's taking multiple seconds for us to really get any feedback. Here's an example of how we do this in O2. So we type in the title, we type in the content, we hit post. I'm actually hitting Command Enter as a shortcut, and immediately that post is added to the DOM. So we're not waiting a second. We're hitting enter and we're adding it. And we're able to do this because we just assume that it's going to post, right? So if we put those side by side and compare them, the question I'm going to ask you is, which is faster? And I think it's pretty easy to say that the second one is faster. But the question really is it? Because we're doing the same thing. We're sending the same response, or the same request, excuse me. And in the end, we get the same response back. We still have to save the post, and we still have to attach metadata or whatever. But why does it appear faster? So when I looked for some quotes to describe this feeling, I came across a quote, "Perception is reality" by Lee Atwater. And I kept digging some more, and I came across one that says, it's not about how fast your site is, it's about how fast your users think it is. And this really hit home with me because it doesn't matter that the request takes a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds. It really just matters how it appears to our users or how it appears to us as we use that app. So this brings us to the question of, how do I actually increase perceived speed? And the best answer I found to this is you use what's called an optimistic interface. And it's just a method of improving the perceived speed by assuming that an interaction will succeed. So by assuming success, we can emulate that request while we wait. And emulating is going to make use of obviously Ajax and Backbone and React and all kinds of different JavaScript stuff. So we're not strictly talking PHP here. We're going to have PHP for the Ajax endpoints and things like that. And it's really going to depend on, you can use Backbone or React, whatever you want for a view layer, or you could go strict jQuery and update the DOM as you want and pull. You have multiple choices there. But again, it all comes down to making the assumption that it's going to be successful. But this might leave you wondering, what happens when it's not successful? And you have to check for that success on the back end when you're actually saving, or you have to check in all of your Ajax requests. And so it adds complexity. And this brings up questions such as, like, how do I check that the request succeeded? Or what do we even do about displaying those failures? How do we recover from those? Do we give the user the option to repost or re-like something? And do we automatically retry? Do we let the user decide, or do we do it ourselves? So going through some examples for what I believe are optimistic interfaces with WordPress, I came up with a few. One was Jetpack. Another one was it's a Rojo Sports app. It was an app presser build out we did for a high school and all of their booster clubs. And we used app presser and then WordPress multi-site for that. And then in my work at Automatic so far since July, I've been working on O2, which is an updated version of P2 that uses Backbone for all of our view layer. So it's, as you can see, much snappier than the old P2. So the first example would be Jetpack. And for this, I really liked the infinite scroll. And we're able to do this because we anticipate that the user is going to keep on scrolling. And we go ahead and make that request as they scroll down, and we just display the results. And this is much faster than having to go to a whole nother, load a whole nother page to get the next 10 blog posts or something. But this doesn't get too much into optimistic as so far as making a request and getting a request back, I don't think. So a better example would be the Rojo Sports app. And the brief for this called for, they wanted both a website and they wanted an app. They wanted to have the same information. They didn't want to duplicate that data. The way it worked was each booster club at the high school got their own site. So they would have rojosports.com/football or /varsity or anything like that. So we attacked this with separate multi-sites for each. And then one thing that was really unique was the parents for the booster clubs wanted each sport to have separate notifications. And I guess this makes sense from the perspective of a parent, because I could really care less if I have a kid in football if I get cheerleader notifications. But it was very technical at the time. And I had no idea how to even do notifications or allow subscriptions. So this is the interface we came up with. We click the settings icon up there, and then you can see as soon as I'm clicking, it's turning off or on. And then I can turn those, anytime I click, basically, it toggles immediately. And then I do the request on the back end. So here's the example, how it looks in PHP. All I did was add a WordPress Ajax endpoint. And what was interesting is we have to check that the request was actually successful. So all I did was near the end, I do the if not update blog option. And since update blog option returns true or false on failure or success, I can decide to send back a failure on that. And then we tie that into the JavaScript. So this is where I say, as the user clicks each one, we're going to get the state, so whether it's checked or not checked. And then we're going to go ahead and send that off through the post. And then on failure, we can decide how we want to recover from that if it does fail. We can send it again. We can choose to show a notification if that was what we wanted to do. We could suggest that the user submitted it themselves again. I mean, there's a lot of things we could do in this example. So as you can see, it requires a combined effort from both the PHP and the JavaScript. On to another example, though. In O2, along with creating posts, we also have the option now to trash posts, and this is one of the first things I did when I started Automatic. And it's hard to see. Sorry for that. So on the front end, you're able to click the post actions in the top right, and what that does is it gives you the option to edit or trash or anything like that. And the interface we wanted to go for is as soon as you trash it, we wanted to get rid of it. There's no need to sit there and look at a spinner and to wait for it to be successful. So the code we used to accomplish that was, if we're on a single post, we want to wait in that case, because you don't want to slide up a post and there not be content on a single page. But if we're on a blog listing, so like the index or a category, anything like that, we can go ahead and safely slide it up. So in this case, what we're doing is we slide up the post. Let me go to destroy view model. We slid up the post, and then we attempted to do the destroy view model, and this is using Backbone. So what we do is on the success, we don't really need to do anything, but on the error, what happens if we can't, if the request wasn't successful and we can't remove the post? What we decided to do here was we close any disclosure, so that was the edit or trash or anything. We then showed a message saying that your post failed, and we slid it back down so it was in view. Something very similar with trash comments, except for in this case, we didn't need to take it out of the DOM, because all we wanted to do is say this comment was trashed, very similar to the interface you see with YouTube, where the message just changed, comment was trashed. We didn't want to lose the conversation. And you can't see it again. So here what we did is, on trash, we went ahead and changed the content. And this is, you can see this in the last line, this model save. And we updated that with some content that said, this comment was trashed. And the failure here is this.onSave error, which we can see here. And in that case, all we did was change the content back, basically. We changed the attribute. All right, so any questions? This was much quicker than I anticipated. Go ahead, sorry.
For somebody that's just starting out with jQuery and PHP and whatnot, what you just showed looks very daunting.
It is pretty technical, yes.
Where would you recommend them starting out at? Is there a website like the Mercury Schools or, that has something to do with jQuery and PHP?
My favorite thing for recommending to people as far as like schools, online schools, is pretty much always Team Treehouse or Code School. That's something I used, in the previous 2 years or so to learn a lot. And it's very JavaScript heavy, you're right in that. So it would take a lot of JavaScript. Something else you might look into also would be Backbone. Backbone, it's a JavaScript library. And so that's pretty much what we use for O2, and it handles a lot of the actual rendering of comments and posts, and that way you're not, although you're duplicating code, it's not as crazy, I guess. Go ahead.
I'm not a developer, I'm trying to set up a retail business. What tools in Jetpack would be useful to me, if any?
One of my favorite tools in Jetpack, at least when I recommend to non-developers, is probably Photon, because it allows you to have a CDN for free. So a CDN would allow you to have a faster perceived speed, because and a faster speed in general, actually, because you're offloading the images from only your server, and we're serving it from WordPress.com, which would be a little bit faster.
Let's say the last part again.
Well, we would serve your images from our servers as opposed to only your server, which would make that faster. That would probably be my main selling point in that case. But I mean, the Jetpack has a lot of features that I think you would find useful. Okay.
I looked at it for a little while. I just haven't figured out if there's anything there I can use.
Gotcha. Yeah, the best recommendation I have is probably Photon, and then there's others. There's single sign-on. There's The comment forms if you want that. It just depends. You would toggle them on and off and check for yourself, I guess. Sorry. Go ahead.
The tool, the Google Page Speed, do you know if they use the perceived as well? Perceived speed or the...
I don't think that's perceived speed. I think that's more of an actual like technical speed. They're telling you when the page is completely done loading, or they're telling you what the paint time is. So those are not perceived speed. Perceived speed is more, it's smoke and mirrors almost. It's magic, because you're shuffling around things. You're saying, look at this while I do this over here.
So on this infinity scroll, do you think they just get like the first screenshot, or they actually scroll the whole content there?
So what's happening in the infinite scroll, more or less, I don't actually work on that plugin myself, is as you near the end of that page, they go ahead and request the next 10 posts or whatever it's going to be, and then they add that to the DOM at that point. Does that mean?
They only get like the first load. They don't get all the posts that you have on the infinite scroll. That's what you're saying?
You mean the Google bot?
Yes, the Google Speed there and the Google bot. Google Page Speed and the Google bot.
The web page test, I don't think it would check infinite scroll in that case. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have a minimum or maximum speed you would want to do this? I mean, if a process takes 5 seconds, I wouldn't want to assume and then use the leave the page and not realize, come back and say, oh, my long email or whatever I posted, it disappeared.
I agree. No, that's a good point. So while perceived speed and optimistic interfaces have the benefit of making things faster in many cases, they also have the benefit of huge failure at times. And a request that hangs or something it can definitely be an issue. So you could add some sort of timeout possibly. If it takes multiple seconds, I would say that'd be a good guess. Good.
Are there any website tools for checking the perceived speed, or is it just kind of a user thing?
I don't think there really are any tools as of yet. I believe it's mostly kind of an emotional or user thing. Yeah. I think it's definitely one of those things that you pick up, which is why I kind of wanted to bring it here, because as soon as you're told about it, like I had this experience myself. As soon as I was told how to make something seem faster, it just clicked. Like so I don't think there are any metrics, but I think it's something you definitely can feel the difference in.
I know you mentioned Photon. Is there some other tool, another plugin, other than the infinite scroll, that really does give you that perception in maybe another area, or just overall?
So one of the other things I think you can do on a typical WordPress website to increase your perceived speed would be to, as soon as someone comments, put that comment in the website immediately. I'm not too sure if Jetpack Comments does that, but it might be, or there are other JavaScript-based comment solutions that would probably give you that effect. Basically, any interaction that the user goes through, you don't want to make them wait. That's kind of the idea. And so if we can go ahead and put that comment in the DOM and show it right away, then that's what we would want to do. Go ahead. Yeah.
When you're adding the comment to the comments list and all that, is there something else there that's updating in real time, like if somebody else happens to post, or is it just putting the user's comment there to show that it posted and it's not doing any other update cycles in the background or anything?
That's a good question. What we do on O2 is we use polling. We don't use no WebSockets or anything like that. We use polling. So every second we go ahead and we query for comments that were added or deleted or modified in the past couple seconds. So as soon as you post the comment, it's not complete. It's a sample. All it has is the comment content and the title and maybe a date. And then after we get that complete request back from the server, we can then add the actual comment ID and the actual timestamp and things like that. So it's not real time. You certainly could make it pretty close to real time if you had some other infrastructure.
Have you used React much? And if you noticed any performance gains using it?
That's a good question. I have been using React on a project we're doing internally lately. It's been interesting. I'm not so sure what we have noticed as a difference between. I noticed that there's much more caching, and so when we switch between pages, it's almost instantaneous. I'm not sure if that's something that's due only to React, or if that's something that's due to us having that caching done somewhere else. But personally, yes, React has been nice, and it's very snappy.
Does it matter if there are ads running in the background if you use this method?
In the background, how do you mean?
Well, some ads will recycle and change their content, and that made me wonder if that would affect the time, the risk in doing this method.
It would be possible. I can't tell you for sure if there would be any or no conflicts. One thing you might run into there is that ads you're often paid on a cost per thousand model, and so if you're just changing the content on the page, you're not causing a reload, so you may not get paid for another view. That could be potentially one issue you would see, although that's not technical. But other than that, I mean, there could be issues potentially. I can't tell you yes or no. Right.
Do you have scenarios where you would not use the perceived method?
You could. I can't think of any off the top of my head that would be an absolute no. The thing to realize is that you don't have to use it all or none, right? You could improve the performance, the perceived performance of your current website by, like real-time comments, basically. As soon as you post a comment, it goes into the DOM, or feedback, or any kind of interaction on the front end of the website, and without having to get rid of or completely switch over to, Backbone or React or something. So I can't think of any hard or fast yes or no's or examples.
Using it in any other scenarios other than user submitted, comments and interactions with the site?
Not off the top of my head. It's mainly a user thing. So anytime they make a request of any sort, you could try to potentially make it seem immediately emulate that instead of waiting for the response back.
Right.
Good.
Do you think that WordPress admin itself is going to start using these kinds of techniques in the near future?
I do think so.
A prime candidate for it.
I do think the WordPress admin will see many techniques such as this that will increase the speed. Good.
You see differences in how you implement this versus mobile versus web?
As far as an actual native app or a web app?
Actual, like a web app. So, do you see any differences where you have to do something differently to accommodate smaller screens, or do you find that generally speaking it translates across both?
I think generally speaking it would work mobile or website or desktop. Excuse me.
I've seen it on both, but I'm just curious if there are any differences.
The main difference would be you're going to use a lot of touch events or click events, so that would be the main difference. And sometimes click events just don't play nice on mobile. And in some of our projects we've worked on at Automatic, I know we've used a library called Tappable that helps translate those better. Outside of that, you're just dealing with data, so you may have some design issues, but I don't think the technology issues would be huge. And actually, I think mobile has the best gains from using a perceived speed because you're dealing with potentially 3G speeds or slower, and so if you can emulate that those are going to be where you're going to see the biggest difference in happiness of users. All right, any more questions? Go ahead.
Are there any conditions in which we definitely not use it?
No, I think he asked that question as well. I can't think of any off the top of my head where you would definitely not use it. It does increase the complexity. of your website, your application, whatever you're doing, it definitely increase the complexity. So if you don't want that, and if maybe you don't have the manpower or the time to maintain that, but I can't think of anything use case wise that you would just say no automatically.
Would this cause more server load since it's an unnecessary form of data if someone wasn't intending to? If you had like a large group of people surfing at once?
Okay, that's a good question. It depends on how you implement it would be my answer. If in Jetpack's case where you're assuming that the user wants to keep on scrolling infinitely, I think you'll definitely increase the server load, and it could be unnecessarily, possibly. In the case that in AppPresser, when you click onto a new post, you could, I think by default now it'll load just the post content and replace it in the DOM, so you're not causing a whole new request. In that case, I think you're actually saving some bandwidth and some server load. So it could really go either way depending on your implementation.
What about things like the multiple toggles you have with on-off and serializing the data? Because are you going to, you turn the checkboxes on-off, now you're going to serialize that data maybe a dozen times. Or
Okay.
is there a way that you can give that perceived action and do one single post right to the database?
So one thing that comes to my mind is you could allow them to toggle it and then not make the request at the same time, and maybe store it in an array on the device itself, and then after they leave that view, perhaps then send the request. I think there's ways to achieve that. Right. Any more? All right. Well, thank you for your time.